read again tonight from Quiet Mind, 1-Minute Retreats from a Busy World. And it's by David Kundtz. And there's a little water wear on the book, so hope that's all right. I'll read a few of these little sections because they just have neat ideas of things to think about and consider. This one's called Every Day, and each one starts out with a quote, and this quote is by Goethe. One ought every day at least to hear a little song, read a good poem, see a fine picture, and if it were possible, to speak a few reasonable words. By Goethe. These are the things Goethe wanted in his day, every day. What do you want in yours? Here is a snippet from a conversation I overheard in a busy downtown store between two middle-aged women. It's so good to see you. We just don't get together as much as anymore. It seems so many of us are saying the same thing. Why is that? Said one. I know exactly what you mean, said the other. It seems that there's always just too much going on. And then the writer says, I'm convinced we all really do know what is happening to the way we are in the world compared to the way we want it to be. As the woman said, there's always just too much going on. The problem is not what we don't know. It's that we somehow feel powerless to change it. When you've begun dealing with the problem of too much going on, you can start to identify just what you want to include in your everyday. Even when you get together with your friend, you might discover that Goethe wasn't far off the mark. With your friend, you might hear a little song, listen to some favorite music, read a good poem, discuss an article you recently read, see a fine picture, visit a museum or show a photo of your grandkids or speak a few reasonable words. Have an enjoyable conversation, catching up on each other's lives. Today, take some moments to decide what do you want your everyday to include, and repeat that every day forever. So that almost might be what your daily practice is. Whatever that is for you. All right, this next little thought is called going to the post office. In proportion as our inward life fails, we go constantly and desperately to the post office. By Henry David Thoreau. Wow, I like that. You may depend on it, Thoreau continues, that poor fellow who walks away with the greatest number of letters, proud of his extensive correspondence, has not heard from himself this long while. I think I know the cause of our cultural, spiritual, and social problems today, just as Thoreau knew 150 years ago. Our inward life is failing. Many of us know this, of course, and just knowing it doesn't change things. But what if someone, maybe you, could convince 10 or 20 people to stop going to the post office for their information, and instead to stay quiet and recollect it for a few minutes, or even an hour a day, to attend to their inward lives? What if I could do the same? I used to think that what we needed was a saint or a prophet, a modern-day Francis of Assisi, who would call us to our senses by the power of his example and love. or Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc to inspire us with her disdain for the acceptable, her single-mindedness, and her devotion to her voices. But we have saints. We've always had saints, canonized or not. We've always had prophets who are well attuned to their inward lives, who have voices of passion and love, voices of virtue and wisdom, who live lives of example and service, and do call us to the same. And still many of us keep on stumbling to the post office. And I'm betting this book was written a while ago, because I think now we stumble to the internet and to Facebook and we fill our lives with that noise instead of quieting and going within. Copyright 2000. So, 18 years old. I think our distractions are perhaps different ones, but maybe we've always looked for distractions to avoid going within. Today, find a way to redirect your trip to the post office or on the internet, email, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, to a journey to your inward life. I think sometimes we do need those distractions. I think they're just the thing to help us relax sometimes, and other times I think they add to our stress. And really only you can be the gauge of that for you. Okay. Next thought. Permission to stop. The only way we could justify sitting motionless in an A-frame cabin in the Northwoods was if we just survived a really messy divorce by Ian Fraser. That's great. Got a little hangnail there. The author's words are a complaint that he had to have justification for doing nothing. He and his friends could not do nothing just because they wanted to. They had to have a very good reason, such as divorce. Then they could justify taking time off or wasting valuable time. They had an excuse. They had just gone through something painful, and people would be hesitant to criticize them. Their guilt would be minimal. But then he wisely throws out that kind of thinking and gives himself permission, no justification necessary, for doing nothing. Unnecessary self-restrictions and false guilt burden many of us and keep us from the peaceful times we yearn for. Quiet time to be alone is not an optional nicety, nor is it just for the retired, the lazy, or those naturally inclined. It is for all of us. It is valuable time well spent. And above all, it needs no justification other than its own noble purpose. To become more fully awake and to remember what you need most. And to remember what you most need to remember about yourself and your life. Do you need permission for doing nothing? Here it is. Use it today. Boy, that's very powerful for me. We just don't live in a society or lifestyle, most of us anyway, where doing nothing is acceptable. We have to be sick. We have to be sick or have some major excuse to do nothing, a divorce or trauma. Interesting. going to pick one. All right, last one. A living picture. A picture lives by companionship. It dies by the same token. It is therefore risky to send it out into the world. How often it must be impaired by the eyes of the unfeeling. Mark Rothko. Do you feel the full impact of that statement? It is really quite a remarkable thing to say. A picture lives by companionship. Unfeeling eyes can hurt it. These are words of one who lives in the world of paradox and mystery. Below the surface, in the spirit world, the most real and certainly the most interesting of all worlds. One of my deep convictions is that we need to pay more attention to artists. They reflect and interpret our world. They see what the rest of us are too busy, too distracted, or otherwise incapable of seeing. They say to us simply, look at this. Take some time and see this. It's important. But that's so true. I'm sitting here thinking that this is what I love when I go to an art museum. It just is incredible to me to see something or feel something from another, the very perspective. It's something I would not have noticed before. That's such a beautiful gift. It's true with dance and music, all the arts, really, for me anyway. All right, back to reading. Too often we dismiss artists as temperamental and difficult and even unwilling to get a real job. Except for the very few who become trendy and collectible in their lifetimes, most die poor. The great ones make money for heirs and collectors. It is not surprising that the words above come from the 20th century painter Mark Rothko, born in Russia. He lived and worked in America. He is a color field painter of the abstract expressionist school. His late and most recognizable works are huge canvases of softly painted or blurred blocks of color, often dark, which seem to float in front of another colored ground. If you stand quietly before one in a museum long enough, you will probably hear some comments which indicate that the art is challenging to the viewer. Some words might be statements of the unfeeling that can impair the work. I'm not sure I understand or even appreciate Rothko's work, but I try to remember his words so as not to hurt his pictures with my eyes. Oh, these are such beautiful little thoughts to me. I love that. Wow. And of course, I don't see a picture of Rothko's work in my mind when I hear the name, so I'm going to have to Google that artist when I'm not having my still time. Okay. Next time you visit a museum, be aware of your power. Boy, that's pretty incredible. So there we go. That's it for tonight. And I think if you haven't been to a museum lately, that would be a nice little treat. And I think for me, museums are fun to go with other people because they point out things, I suppose. But I think going to an art museum by yourself is like the perfect self-date. I once took a class called The Artist's Way, and it's actually a book. And this gentleman was offering a class, and about, I'd say 8 to 10 of us took it. And one of the things that the author suggests in the book is that you make a date one night a week with yourself, and you do something that's really feels like you're taking yourself on a date. So that might be a luxurious bath. And it might be going out to a special dinner with yourself. But getting out, because we live in a society where we tend to feel most comfortable and safe inside, and sometimes for some of you that may be the most important treat you can give yourself. You might have very social jobs, but for many it's a challenge, and you will find a little gift in getting out and doing this little date night with yourself. And museum was one of my amazing surprises. It was the first time I'd ever gone by myself, and it was incredible to go to this museum and see things, spend as much time as I wanted, and luxuriate in the stories and the colors and the textures and everything that was at the museum. And since then I go quite a bit more often to art exhibits on my own. I'm sure many of you do that already anyway, but so permission to treat yourself to something, reminders to be kind with our thoughts and our comments, and permission to be still and do nothing. It's okay to do that. All right. Rest well.